Again, Shana Tova. The phone message is always the same. Rabbi, please call so-and-so as soon as possible. They wouldn't say what it was about, only that it's important and they need to talk to you. In my experience, such a call to the rabbi can only mean one thing. Someone is in crisis, and it's too personal, sensitive, or complex to share with the person taking the message or even to leave on my voicemail. Since October 7th, I get that phone message probably once a week. Like the shofar that we just heard, its blast compared by the rabbis to both a mother's weeping over her child and an urgent alarm. What I am about to share with you is both a cry of pain and a warning. A cry of pain over what has happened in so many of our families, and a warning that we must deal with this moment in Jewish history with wisdom and with urgency. And so when I call back that phone message, this is often what I hear on the other end. Rabbi, do you have any advice on how I can talk to my adult child about Israel-Palestine? Now, it might not be a child. Sometimes it's a spouse, a sibling, a friend, or a coworker. But it is always someone that they cannot easily dismiss or ignore. It's a relationship that is important to them, and it is falling apart over this one issue. We raise our children to be thoughtful and caring. We raise them to do something in the world, and we raise them to think for themselves. But we never thought, never in a million years, that members of our own family would charge us with being complicit in genocide, apartheid, or colonialism. We never imagined that siblings, friends, mentors would refuse to talk with us, refuse to sit with us, would cancel us, or that we would feel compelled to do the same to them. How many in this room, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, how many in this room have a member of your family, a friend or a coworker, that you can't talk with or have difficulty having a conversation with about Israel? That's a lot of hands. That's a lot of broken hearts and anguished souls connected to those hands. That's a lot of parents walking around on eggshells around their children. A lot of siblings that get dropped off of family group chats or seated farther and farther away at the family meal. That's a lot of friends that haven't really spoken about anything of substance in almost a year. Or let's be honest, haven't spoken at all. Families are breaking apart. Parents and kids are walking away from each other. Lifelong friendships are ending. The war, it's 6,000 miles away, but it's also right here. How do you talk to people who reject or vilify Israel, even when they are people that you love? My answer is a question. I know, very rabbinic of me. It's actually 3 questions, which I guess makes me like an Uber rabbi or something. When you realize you're speaking with someone whose views on Israel are very different from your own, be they on the left or on the right, Jewish or non-Jewish, ask them 3 questions. Why do you care? What do you want? And what's your solution? Why do you care about this? What do you want for the outcome to be? And how are you going to get there? What's your solution? To that first question, why do you care? And in this context, why do you care about the plight of the Palestinians? I often hear some version of, because the Jewish values that we were raised with, the values that you taught them in your home, the values that we taught them here in synagogue, are to care for the needy, to tend to the sick, to empower the powerless. We taught them tikkun olam, repair of the world. And we taught them that every human being is created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God, and worthy of dignity and security. And we taught them not to stand idly by the blood of their neighbor. And we taught them, ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. We particularly in Reform Judaism taught them a Torah of social justice. They will say that they care about the plight of the Palestinians because they are Jewish, because we raised them to care and to take action. For that answer alone, we should celebrate them. Celebrate that our children are guided by empathy and moral concern. Celebrate that they are trying to apply what they learned at our Seder table, sitting next to you at these High Holy Day services year after year, upstairs in our Hebrew school, at Jewish summer camp, on a birthright trip. We should celebrate that they are trying to apply that and all that they learned from you as a moral guide to how to live in the world and to do so as a mitzvah. Because it is a mitzvah. It's what we are commanded to do. That doesn't mean that we have to agree with them, but we can agree that they genuinely care about the suffering of the Palestinian people. And that's a good thing, because we raised them to care. We raised them to act on their concerns. However, as much as I celebrate their empathy and celebrate their pursuit of justice, I also feel a need to rebuke and correct them. Yes, we taught them, if I am only for myself, what am I? But there is a verse that comes before that one in Hillel's famous quote. That verse is, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? That's at least as important as the second part. Social justice for others is not to the exclusion of social justice for yourself, for your family, for your people. And maybe it even must come first, like oxygen masks on an airplane. Our scholar in residence, Yossi Klein Halevi, who will be with us again this year, has a simple test of when concern for others crosses over the line and puts the Jewish people in danger. His test is that any group or individual that felt the need to be at a rally in support of Israel in early November, in Washington, in Toronto, here in Vancouver, any group that felt the need to be there in early November, they are a part of the tent. That includes groups that we might have deep and profound disagreements with. But if you were there, if you felt the need after October 7 to be with fellow Jews and allies, and to affirm Israel, and to decry the attacks, the hostage-taking, the murder of innocents, the sexual crimes. If you stood with the Jewish community on November 7, after the dust settles and the bodies were buried and identified, after the full extent of the horrors that Hamas had inflicted on the Jewish people and the Jewish state were laid bare, if you stood with your fellow Jews and said, never again is now, then you're in the tent. That's Yossi's test. But if on November 7, a month later, when the atrocities were there for all to see, if then you argued that Hamas was justified, that Israel got what it deserved because of its treatment of the Palestinians, because of occupation, if you are advocating and protesting and posting and promoting that Israel as a sovereign Jewish and democratic state is not legitimate, has no right to exist within any of its borders, from the river to the sea, then you have joined with the present and historic enemies of Israel and the Jewish people to undermine Jewish existence and Jewish survival. If you chant by any means necessary, and you think that terror will drive Jews out, dead or alive, then you cannot claim with any legitimacy that your Jewish values have led you to take that position. You have, sadly, divorced yourself from Judaism and from the Jewish people. You have left your family. Your family did not leave you. And I beg you please, to reflect on that, to find room in your heart for all people, including your own, particularly your own. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And still there's a caveat, even still, to Yossi's test. Yossi makes a clear distinction between anti-Zionists who are leaders, who have turned their professional lives into undermining the legitimacy of Israel, and the rank-and-file young people generally, who join independent Jewish voices or similar groups as an expression of their Jewish values as they understand them, even if their understanding is incomplete or incorrect. Our kids, our friends and family who see the suffering of innocence, even if it is myopic and only on one side of the border, we cannot reject them. They are our children and our children's friends, and we do not reject our kids, no matter what. There was always a seat at the Seder table, even for the wicked child, because they are by definition family. Criticizing the policies of the Israeli government does not put you outside of the tent. Indeed, vigorously engaging with the complexity of a Jewish and democratic state existing alongside neighbors that have tried time and again to destroy it and have sworn to keep trying, engaging in that makes Israel stronger. But joining organizations and movements that undermine the legitimacy and the very survival of the Jewish people and or the Jewish state does put you outside the tent. Protest, yes. Denial, no. To the question, what do you want? Thoughtful friends and family will say that they want equal rights for all people between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. This is maybe the most generous meaning of the chant from the river to the sea. Ask them if that vision includes Jews and Israelis. If their vision is a land with only Palestinians, or for that matter, if their vision is a land with only Jews, then you know who and what you're dealing with. Here it is appropriate, and I would urge you and argue that it is necessary to enforce boundaries. If you find that a friend or family member has core values that devalue you, those you love, or is attacking you based on your identities, it is okay to say, we're just not going to talk about this because I love you too much to hate you. And if we keep doing this, that's where this is headed. And so let's stop. I love you too much to hate you. So let's stop. Boundaries are lines that you set for yourself. They are followed by actions you take to hold those lines. Long ago, the poet Robert Frost wrote, "Good fences make good neighbors." Fences and boundaries are really important, especially when you're sharing the same physical or emotional space with another person. So they are still invited to Rosh Hashanah lunch and Yom Kippur break fast, but they must respect your boundaries and keep those extremist ideas in the car and maybe to themselves when they are around you. But if, when you ask your adult child or your dear friend or your family member or your coworker, what do you want? And they say that they want a future where Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians live side by side in peaceful coexistence in a land that both hold as sacred and ancestral, then ask them the third question: how? Not because they possess the long, elusive Israel-Palestine peace plan. They don't. But for the thought experiment of just how complex and complicated finding a solution really is. Certainly more than either party can articulate in an Instagram post or in a family group chat. How? How would they build a peaceful future after so much bloodshed? How would they handle the Jewish and Palestinian rights of return? How would they deal with violent extremists on both sides? You can have long and constructive conversations with even the fiercest Israel critics by asking these three questions. Why do you care? What do you want? How will you achieve it? Why, what, how? By the way, this question, how, it also works when you meet those staunch Israel supporters whose positions you oppose or you view as too extreme. If they answer, as extreme right-wing members of the ruling coalition have said in Israel as recently as this week, it is all ours, Gaza and Lebanon, ask them how exactly Israel can rule over so many people and remain a stable, economically viable democracy, let alone a Jewish state. Ask them how they propose removing Palestinians from their homes and villages and not doing to them exactly what has been done to Jews throughout history. The urge to destroy everything and everyone you perceive as the enemy is understandable after October 7. But my follow-up question is always the same. Then what? What comes next? But please understand, as I mentioned before, you're not going to come up with the Israel-Palestine peace plan on Facebook or over coffee with your adult child or with a coworker. But a constructive, values-based conversation is what the world needs right now. And that can start with the two of you. If two people who genuinely know, love, and care about each other can't have this conversation, then it is ludicrous for either of you to expect strangers or even enemies, let alone nations, to resolve their differences. If you can't fix it over coffee, how are they going to fix it over borders? After you have asked your friend, family, or coworker these questions, after you've listened and heard from them, then you need to do one more thing. Maybe actually we all need to do this. And we need to do it before and after. After we have listened to their point of view and reasoning, we need to answer those questions for ourselves. We need to answer why, what, and how. Here are my answers. I don't care about Israel because of anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. The hate of others does not define me. I care about Israel because the physical and spiritual place it holds is the focus of my prayers, as it has been the focus of our prayers and the prayers of my people for thousands of years. I care about Israel because it is imperfect, and yet guided by Jewish and democratic values, it must always strive to be more perfect. Because its founding principles are the foundation of my life and the lens through which I view the world. For those values to be true and enduring, they must be proven to work in real life, in the present tense. Israel is the experiment that proves the theory of Judaism as a way of life. I care about Israel because our people's story of return and redemption is the manifestation not just of Jews who built up humanity's yearning to be a free people in their own land, not just for Jews, but many have prayed for it. Many have prayed to return to their ancestral lands. And our people, rising from the ashes of the Shoah, we did it. Hatikvah. We realized a hope after 2,000 years. Israel is an everlasting symbol of life over death, of hope over despair. Israel has taken a barren land and made it bloom again. It has taken an ancient language and made it speak again. It has taken a tattered and shattered nation and made it live again. What do I want? I want peace. I want peace between Israel and its neighbors, not merely the absence of war, but the flourishing of harmony, of cooperation and coexistence between peoples who share a love for the land and are guided by faith in that very same God. A God who demands of them the same sacred respect for human life and adherence to its sacred teachings of justice and compassion. Extremist Jews and extremist Muslims do not define either faith. They are the exception, not the rule. And how? How do we achieve this vision of peace and coexistence? We must root out and defeat extremists on the left and on the right amongst Jews and Muslims. In Israel, in Palestine, in Canada, at the UN, amongst all of those who exploit this conflict for power or political gain around the world, we must root out the extremists. Neither people are pawns, and Jewish survival is not a game, nor is it up for debate. Harmony is found in the balance between things, in the center, in the middle ground. So Both must be willing to compromise, but not on our very existence as a nation and a people. Peace and coexistence begins with abandoning the destructive notion that either people can be pushed out of the land by force or terror, or that either's claim to the land entitles the other to rule over them. The Jewish people have returned home after being exiled for more than 2,000 years. And in spite of all efforts to defeat, destroy, and deny us, we are back, and we are not going anywhere. Peace is not possible till the world, particularly the Arab world, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran included, accept that immutable truth. Ein eretz acheret, we have no other land, and let me tell you, we never have. One last thing. Now it's your turn. Go home and answer these 3 questions for yourself. It's not easy. The sermon took me a while. Write a letter to your children, your grandchildren, your dear friend or colleague. Put down on paper what is in your heart. Why does Israel matter to you? And what do you hope to see for its future? And then ask them to write back to you about Israel, or about the people of Gaza, or about Palestinians in general. Engage in the conversation from a place of values and curiosity. The gates of tshuva, of return and repair, they are open these 10 days in particular. And this is a time to reflect and reconcile with your family, with your friends, with your community. It's a time to reconcile with ourselves. Like the sounding of the shofar, we've got to put some effort into it. Give voice to the pain over what has happened between you. Sound the warning over what you think this moment means for your Judaism, for Israel, for the Jewish people, for your relationship with your child, with your colleague, with your friend. You may not solve the Israel-Palestine conflict, but you might heal your own relationship with each other. And that is how we truly start to heal the world. And wouldn't that be the greatest of blessings and the greatest of hopes in a new year? I can't think of a better place or a better time to start. And I hope that at least on that first step, we can all agree. Shana Tova.